Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was possibly one of the most popular games of last year. Well, it was definitely one of the most popular games of last year. We're going to take a look at Gaia Project, being published by Z-Man Games. This is the spiritual and mechanical or mechanistical or, I don't know, mechanism-wise sequel to Terra Mystica. I almost say Terraforming Mars, and I always do. Terra Mystica. So if you've played Terra Mystica, this game is going to seem very familiar to you. But they've made some changes, a little bit in the gameplay, a little bit in streamlining. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of this box. We'll see how the game plays, and we'll come back at the end and get my opinions on Gaia Project. So here you can see Gaia Project all set up. We're set up for a two-player game just to keep things small because there's a ton of stuff that goes on this table. Now, before we showed you anything here, we did all of the variable setup. So all of these tiles here in the center of the table can be set up variably. All of the starting positions for the players' starting buildings, which are mines, all of those are variable. All of the different player abilities, or I guess round-to-round abilities, are variable. All of the round-to-round scoring is variable. The endgame scoring is variable, and even the player races are variable. And there's a lot of player races you can choose from. So note that all of this, even some of the stuff over here kind of on this tech track, is set up variably. So game to game, everything's going to be quite different. So at the start of this game, everybody's going to have one of these little round-to-round abilities that you get when you pass in a round. And each one of them is going to have some type of special income, and you'll see income here with the hand under it, so income of money or a QIC, quantum intelligence cube. Some of them may have actions on them. For example, this one gives you a free terraforming step, if you're familiar with Terra Mystica. Or this one here gives you some points when you return this, dependent on how many for example, of your mines that you have out. So each player is going to draft one of these at the start of the game, and they're going to be using them in the round during their getting their income. Then at the beginning of the round, every round you're going to gain your income. So that's going to be based on your player board here, as well as any additionals you may have with that hand underneath them. So you'll see here, for example, that this player is going to gain 2 money from here. They're going to gain a green cube, so they would grab those things and add them to their income. Money would just be on this slider here. And they're also going to gain what's printed on their player board. So for example, they'd gain 3 ore right there, and they have a knowledge that they're going to gain right there. So just to know that there's this income step where you gain a lot of resources that you'll be using later. After you go to income, you're going to move on and you're going to go into the actions phase. The actions phase is going to be broken down, 1 action per player around the table in turn order, which is dictated by this little thing over here. On your turn, there are 8 different actions you can take. Those 8 different actions go pretty quickly, so let's just give you a quick rundown of them. You can build a new building. So if you have a mine here, and you are within range of a place where you can build it, you may build that building. Now you must only build on your own colored planet. So here we can see, for example, that the blue player builds on blue planets. You can also see that they require terraforming steps to build on other planets. For example, white and red are 1 terraforming step, where orange and black are 2, and yellow and brown are 3. So, in their starting position, blue may want to try and get to another planet that they can build on. For example, this white right here, which is only 1 terraforming step away. The problem is they currently only have a range of 1 as dictated by this track over here. With a range of 1, you'll see they're actually 2 hexes away from that, so they can't get to it. So they may need to temporarily increase their range, and there are ways to do that, such as spending these green cubes to temporarily boost your range. Anyhow, once they get within range, they can build on this planet here once they terraform it. Terraforming also costs you resources, so now they need this to be a blue planet. It's 1 step away, and if we look at the tech track over here, we see it costs 3 ore to gain 1 step on this terraforming track. They could spend 3 ore, 1, 2, 3. They could spend 1 more ore and 2 more money if they were within range of this, and they could build their building on there, their mine on there, in order to have more buildings out on the board. Alternately, if they had started with a different starting ability, for example, this one here, they could have taken an action to place a tile on here, and this is one of the different types of actions, to cover up an orange action in order to take that. So that would have given them a free terraforming step. They would have saved their 3 ore, and they still would have been able to build this building. All right, so that's building buildings, and you can only build mines directly, only the smallest buildings on your board. You'll see as you continue to build things, you'll get more income throughout the game. Now, you may also upgrade a building. So as a different action, as your one action for your turn, you could upgrade a building. And buildings upgrade along the paths that you see on this board here. So the mines can upgrade to this slightly larger building. I'm terrible with the names of them, so pardon me. But then these buildings here can upgrade to the research institutes, or the research buildings or the planetary institutes. And then these one can upgrade to, I think they're called academic buildings or something like that. So you kind of have this branching path of the small to the medium to a different medium, or the large, and then this other medium to a large as well. When you upgrade a building, you have to upgrade to the appropriate building. So for example, I could upgrade a small building here to this medium-sized one by paying either 3 or 6 money and 2 ore. Now, why is it either? Well, it depends on if you're building within range of somebody else. So for example, if I want to upgrade this building, or even this building, that is less than 2 away from yellow here, it's only going to cost me 3 money and 2 ore. Same is true for this one, but if I had a building way out here and I wanted to upgrade it, this one's not within 2, so it would cost me 6 money and the appropriate ore. For building this, I pay the appropriate resources, I return the building to my board, and the player next to me has the option of gaining power. Now, we haven't talked about power yet, but they would gain power in these power wheels here, equal to the power of the building that I'm building next to, the largest building that's within range, and they're going to pay a number of victory points -1 for that power. So they could gain 1 power, because this is a 1 power building, as indicated by this little purple dot here. And it would cost them 0 victory points. So of course they would gain that on their board by sliding a little purple disc from the lowest bowl to the next highest bowl. Now, upgrading to larger and larger buildings has better and better benefits. So for example, upgrading to this medium-sized building here just gets you money income. But what it also does is it increases the power of your buildings on the board. Little buildings are worth 1 power, medium buildings are worth 2 power, and the large buildings are worth 3. And this will become important when we talk about building federations, which is a way to get victory points and some abilities in the game. Additionally, building to the research buildings, the academic institutes, and the planetary institutes gets you some special things in the game. So you can see, if I remove some of this stuff, there's an outline shape underneath these 2 types of buildings here. Anytime you build one of these, you get to take one of these little kind of chits over here that has a special ability or income or something else on it throughout the game. So for example, this one is an action to gain 4 power. This is some income. This is a straight 7 points. So anytime you build one of those, you're going to take one of these tiles, never having a duplicate, and place it over in your area to use throughout the game. Correspondingly, you're also going to move your pawn up on the corresponding track underneath whichever one you happen to take. These tracks have several abilities in the game, so this one decreases your cost per terraforming step. This one increases the range that you're able to build next to, so you'll see it goes up to 2. This one gets you green cubes, which can be quite useful through the game, and we'll come to that. This one is a Gaia forming track, so the more you go up on this, the more you'll be able to interact with these purple planets out on the board that we'll talk about in a little bit. The orange and blue tracks being pure income for various things throughout the game. You'll also note that there are 3 of these that are below several tracks, and when you take any of these ones on the lower area here, you get to choose which track you'd like to move up on. Okay, so that's what's going to happen when you build these buildings. When you build your large building here, your planetary institute, you tend to get some type of special ability in the game. The ability of the Terrans here is once they've built this building, they get some power income, but they also, anytime they move power from this green bowl here into these bowl number 2, which is already a benefit, typically it moves into 1, but when they move their power from green to bowl 2, they're going to be able to spend that power to gain resources, and most players cannot do this. So they're getting an extra benefit by moving things into this green bowl and back out. Now, speaking of these bowls and the power that I keep referencing, if you haven't played Terra Mystica, you don't know anything about this. These powers start in different bowls. There's some in bowl 1 here, there's some in bowl 2, and then you'll see there's an empty bowl 3 and a green area here. Anytime you gain power, which is the symbol showing, let me see if I can find one here, this symbol right here showing a number and an arrow over it, it tells you how much power to gain, or for when people build near you on the board, you're going to gain power, and you're always going to move power from the lowest bowl that has any into it into the next higher. So if I were to gain 4 power here, I would move all 4 of these to the next highest bowl. Now that there's nothing in 1, if I gain any more power, they'll move from 2 to 3. Power that is in bowl 3 can be spent for a variety of different things. Some of those are on the board over here as actions, so you'll see I could spend 7 power to gain 3 knowledge, or 5 power to get 2 terraforming steps, 4 power to gain ore, or money, or knowledge, 3 3. So there's a lot of things you can spend power on to gain kind of resources throughout the game to do things. Additionally, on your board over here, there's a conversion rate for spending power as a free action to various types of resources as well. Finally, power can be spent from anywhere on here and moved into this green area to Gaia form, which we're going to talk about later, or you can destroy power out of the game from bowl 2 to advance another power to bowl 3 to quickly get stuff into bowl 3 so it can be spent. So that's the base idea behind power. Now, let's move on with the game a little bit. The next action we'll talk about is Gaia forming. So the Terran player starts with a Gaia former, and that's this little ship-like thing right here, and that's because they start with a step up on the Gaia forming track. Nobody else in the game is going to start with one right now, and they have this ship, and what it lets them do is, as an action, they can spend 6 power out of any bowls, moving it into this green area. So for example, something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was not the optimal way to do it, but in doing so, it lets them place this Gaia former out. Now, right now, blue still has a range of 1, so they'd have to do this in an adjacent planet, and conveniently, they happen to be right next to a purple planet, which is normally unsettleable. In order to do this, they're going to spend that 6 power into that green bowl, and they're going to put their Gaia former out on this planet. At the end of the round, this is going to become a green planet, and green planets are special in this game in that they cannot be terraformed, or whatever you want to call it. They must be settled differently, either by being a purple planet and becoming a green planet later, or if you would like to settle directly onto a green planet, you must spend a green cube to build there, and it stays a green planet for the remainder of the game. So through the normal steps, you'd have to spend a green cube to settle on this green planet, but if you're going through the process of Gaia forming by turning a purple into a green, later blue will not have to spend the green cube to build on this green planet. They're simply going to have to pay the cost of a new mine to build over there. Alright, so that's how Gaia forming works, and it's a special way of getting out onto these purple planets that are otherwise uninhabitable. And sometimes there will be goals throughout the game that ask you to Gaia form, or your ability may lead to a more beneficial way to settle those planets. Now, moving on from there, there are other actions you can take still, and just for clarity, these are all outlined on a little card so that you don't forget them. So I'm going to talk about knowledge now. Throughout the game, you're going to gain this knowledge. As your action, if you have 4, or for some races less of it, you may spend that 4 knowledge on your turn in order to go up on any one of these tracks over here, increasing your abilities. And we already talked about what each of those does. So perhaps blue would like more range. They decided to start stepping up on here. This first step gets them a green cube, but they don't yet get to a 2 range. The next step would increase their range more, so that they have an easier time settling out in the planets. Anytime you step above this black line here, you're going to gain some power, and you're also going to gain victory points at the end of the game for each step you are above that black line. Alright, so now we have a couple of more actions that you can deal with. We talked about spending power here, but you'll note that there's also an area for spending green cubes. If you happen to have an excess of these because your range is already increased, or you're not planning on settling a lot of green planets, you can spend these for various things throughout the game. Some of them, for example, let you take one of these tiles again, or if you have access to these ones at the top, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you can grab one of those. The next one here is going to let you take one of these Federation tokens, or reuse a Federation token, I should say, and we'll talk about Federation tokens momentarily, but just know it lets you reuse one. And then this low one here scores you 3 points, plus 1 point for every different color of planet you've managed to settle. So, those actions are available. We already talked about the ability to use an action that's orange, so you may acquire some of these throughout the game. These pop up in various different places, on player boards, on these tiles you can take, sometimes on these income, as you can see there. So if you have one of those, you may spend your action to take that. The last real action you can take is to form a federation, and in order to make that happen here, I'm just going to manipulate the board a little bit, removing player pieces. Note that this is not a real example. 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go ahead and put one more building out here, 7. So in order to federate, you must have a connected group of at least 7 power in buildings. So we'll see we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 power in these buildings all built out here. However, they are not directly connected, and that's where these pieces right here come into play. These are satellites. They're also used for markers for various things in the game, but you can spend these on your turn, or place these on your turn by spending power out of any bowl, but it goes out of the game. So for example, in this case, this player would need to destroy 1 power to make 1 satellite. And this satellite gets placed in a way that it connects all of the buildings that need to be connected in order to form this federation. Now that there are 7 power in this federation, they're going to put a little federation token out, And they're going to get the benefit of choosing any one of these Federation bonuses that you can see here. So 8 points in a green cube, or 7 points in 2 ore, or 6 points in 2 knowledge. You get the idea. They're going to take one of these, they'll score it immediately, and this is going to give them a Federation. So Federations are good, but in addition to that, it's going to open up some things over here. Now, when you federate, it opens up the option to get to the top of any one of these tracks, and only one person can ever be on the top of a track. Additionally, if you're on the steps above or below any one of these tiles right here, you have the option when you take one of these tiles to instead take one of these by flipping your Federation marker over. When you do so, it must cover up an existing tile, so if you had an existing one, you would place it on top of it, and now you're going to have this ability for the rest of the game, and these tend to be a little bit better than the ones you gained down here. Now, the game is going to play out over 6 rounds. At the end of the round, you will pass. When you pass, you will return your marker here. As I said, some of those give you points and you return them, and you will take a new one of the 3 that will be there. So you can't take the one you just returned, but you can take any one of the 3 that are still there, and you will move your marker to the passed spot to dictate the turn order for the next round. Now, each round of the game will play out a little bit differently, and you'll see there's these 6 markers here. These are random. So in the first round, every time you make a step up on this track, at least in this random order, you're going to gain 2 points. In the second round, anytime you put a mine onto a green building, you'll gain 3 points. In the third round, anytime you place a mine at all, you'll gain 2. In the fourth round, anytime you build to the second size building, you'll get 3. You get the idea. Terraforming steps are worth points, big buildings are worth points. So each round, there's a little bit of a different focus that you can kind of cater to in order to gain victory points. At the end of the 6 rounds, there are 2 additional things that score here, and you'll see these are randomized as well. So one of these here is going to be who has the most satellites on the board. So actually building this Federation so efficiently here, where I only need to use 1 satellite to connect all of these buildings, would be a detriment here, because I want to have as many satellites as possible at the end of the game. However, that means I need to spend a lot of power throughout the game, destroying it out of the game in order to get those satellites, and maybe I have to spend more time building a little bit less efficiently so that I need to use those satellites more. Of course, these markers here can be used to track throughout the game how many satellites each player has built. The other goal at the end of the game is going to be having the most buildings in this case. So whoever has the most buildings will score some points. And those points are 18 for first, 12 for second, and 6 for third. Obviously, this is a 2-player game, so it would score slightly differently, but overall, that's the gist of the game. So most of the time, you're going to be scoring points throughout building buildings, following these goals throughout the game, maybe spending some points as other players build things that you may gain power to further yourself in the game, and then, of course, trying to pay attention to these endgame win conditions in order to score those points as well. And whoever best does this throughout the game is going to be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Gaia Project from Z-Man Games. Now, I didn't have time to cover kind of the intricate details of everything you can do. There's a lot of converting you can do to get different resources. And while I touched on it, there's just a lot of ways to kind of get to what you want. In addition, I only showed you the Terrans for a race, but each one of these boards in the different colors is dual-sided. So there's 2 races in every color. There's a kind of a standard race and a more complicated race with more complicated power that you can use to keep this fresh. And so overall, I think one of the major themes of this game, just like its sister game, Terra Mystica, is that there is a ton of variability here. There's a ton you can do. Now, I will say that I personally prefer this over Terra Mystica for several reasons. The main reason being, though, that they really streamlined the game in terms of the gameplay. What they did was they took out a lot of the fiddliness. You're no longer placing chits on the board to change the color of the land permanently. They added some things in terms of that tech tree. It was the cultist track before. It's still similar to that track, except for now you get some more benefits as you move along, gaining different things you can do throughout the game and enhancing, of course, your abilities in the game in general. So that's really been changed a decent amount. And then the Gaia forming aspect of it really kind of adds another level of ways that you can expand, along with those variable endgame conditions. Sometimes you focus more on that Gaia forming, sometimes less, sometimes more on building, sometimes more on federating, sometimes more on satellites, right? So overall, there's a ton of stuff there. I feel like it's just a little bit more streamlined Terra Mystica, but yet at the same time, perhaps a little bit more deep or involved, and that's something that I like. So if that sounds good to you, check it out. That's Gaia Project from Z-Man Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com.